Welcome to the Natural History Cupboard. Come on in. And welcome back to the Natural History Cupboard podcast, the place where the weird and wonderful parts of the natural world come together. I'm your host, Gareth, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Aaron. Say hello.
Mega Van and Melin. You guys haven't heard that one for a while.
Oh God, yeah, I have forgotten what that is.
That's it's Greetings, friends
in Elvish.
in Elvish.
There
yeah.
we go. Well,
Kenya.
We're back in our brand new cupboard.
Our brand new cupboard with additions.
Yeah. You got the cabinet that we brought in here moments before starting to record.
Yeah.
So it's got some bits and pieces in it. We'll add some more to it as we go along. But for the moment, you've got we've got an ostrich egg that you can see there. There's an ammonite.
Very good book.
Very good book.
The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaur by
Steve Brissetti.
Yeah. Dr. Steve Brissetti.
We've got a few other bits and pieces in there. Some smaller fossils up there. But I'm sure we'll add to that as we go along.
Yeah.
Your plan to get a shelf and everything.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's a few more bits and pieces. As I said last week, this will adapt as we troubleshoot this and yeah, but basically adapt as we go on. But there is plans for a repaint, a shelf, something to go behind us. But I think most importantly of all, especially based off last week and this week, is going to be a webcam of some sort, isn't it? We're going to
improve
the video quality,
but we'll still keep the shoe rack that we're currently filming from, right?
No, that is actually going to go.
This is a high-tech piece of equipment. Obviously, you can't see this for two reasons. If you're listening to us on the podcast, you can't see any of it.
No.
And two, if you're watching the YouTube video of this, you can't see it because it's behind the computer. But currently, you're lovingly balanced on a shoe rack, which shows the high-tech nature of what we got here. But we work with what we've got. It's a solid platform.
That will change too.
Oh, well, I like it. It's nice.
It's more cupboard-like, isn't it?
Yeah, we're definitely in a cupboard. It's good. Yeah. Well, I've not been up to a giant amount this week. No, I can't honestly think of a much that I've done natural history wise. No. Yourself?
Well, yes. I've done a few things this week. So I think I mentioned last week. Did I mention last week that we've been rock pooling?
Yep, you went rock pooling.
Did that again this week. The weather's held up for us to do that. Also, I sort of, by a technicality, I haven't won the fish spotting competition, but I could bend it to say that I've won it. Basically, we were down in Bude. We were crossing the bridge. The competition that we have going, me and my family, to who's going to spot the first fish is basically who's going to spot the first fish from the bridge in our village. I spotted the first fish on a bridge
in Bude,
but it was in Bude. It just wasn't in our village. So I've done the task.
Technicalities
on a technicality of it being in a different location. Yeah. I don't think I can get that away with that, can I?
Your talk of fish has actually spurred me on. I have done something. I went to see a Devonian era fish exhibit in our local museum today, where they had loads of 3D printed life-size Devonian era fish, from Titanichthyes and Tiktaalik to a relatively small Dunkleosteus. But then again,
I mean, fitting a Dunkleosteus in Barnsley Museum.
It was decent though. Yeah. I had a look at the other bits. They've got the straight tusk mammoth there, Paleoloxodon, and a few other bits and pieces. But
we're wearing our podcast t-shirts again this week. So last week you had Tuatara and I Tyrannosaur, is that right?
Yeah.
This week you've got
my very old original Weta one.
Oh yeah, and I have very originally stuck with my Tyrannosaur shirt.
You'll get a new one at some point.
But if you like these t-shirts, they're on the T-Mill site. Probably worth mentioning that when you go on the T-Mill, not all the creatures we've featured will be there. But I'm pretty sure if they send us a message, we can get it up. We
can certainly,
that you can, because it doesn't take any effort really to do it.
We can certainly alter them.
It's already designed.
If there is a particular creature that you are dying for, let us know.
Yeah, if you want, if you really really want a tardigrade, then
woo, tardigrade. Anyway, shall we move on into the news, shall we?
let's do it.
Okay.
It's the news!
Right, well, we're into this week's news. Aaron, tell us about the news.
Every week, the weird and wonderful world of natural sciences offers up a embarrassment of riches when it comes to news and interesting stories. And though we are quite obviously a small team here in the Natural History Cupboard, it's our aim to keep you guys up to date on the good, the odd, and the exciting. And so let's open up our Natural History Cupboard newsreel and dive into some of the more interesting headlines.
Yeah.
And Gareth, it is your turn first.
Well, this week I've got news on the Sycamore Gap tree, which we've reported on more than a few times now.
Yeah.
And in fact, 2 men have been charged with the felling of the Sycamore Gap tree. This comes from BBC News, where essentially 2 people have been jailed, or not jailed, they've been charged, sorry. Daniel Graham, 38, and Adam Carruthers, 31, from Cumbria, have been charged with criminal damage, both to the tree and to the adjacent Hadrian's Wall. Let's keep in mind as well, the wall itself is a historical landmark in itself, as much as we focus mainly on the tree. But they've damaged an actual piece of history as well.
Yeah.
The men were arrested last October and have been on bail since then, Northumbria police have said, and they're due to appear before magistrates in Newcastle on the 15th of May. So they are, well, coming up to that. Basically, the police are aware that there's strong sentimental feeling about the tree. I'd say there's fairly strong opinion about it.
I would say so.
And they've said, but a reminder to avoid speculation, including online, which could impact the ongoing case. Now, obviously, we don't want people coming up with theories and everything online, but I think we can probably agree they're 2 people who didn't like the tree and are just probably horrible people. And that's not me speculating.
Let's not speculate.
That's not speculation.
They're horrible people.
Well, look, there's no need to have done it. The tree wasn't threatening them.
No.
Tree came out of nowhere.
That is, if it is definitely them.
Well, that is true.
Yeah.
So avoid speculation, just like I did. Anyway,
how do you follow that?
you speculate. You speculate on your one now.
Okay, so mine comes from the BBC, or does it?
We'll never know.
It comes to us from the BBC, and it's news that rare eel and shark among 81 species found along our coast. So a baited camera has been set up by researchers from the University of Sussex, basically to survey sea life across 28 coastal sites in the UK. The taupe shark and European eel are among a plethora of species that scientists hope will surprise and inspire the British public into protecting our vital and threatened coastal habitats.
I like a taupe shark.
I like taupe sharks.
Cool. Far more like a species of shark that most people aren't even aware that exists. So
yes, it's a member of the hound shark family.
So my next one comes from RNZ Online, which is New Zealand news organisation. Quite a big creature. Kiwi bird surprises sawmill workers near Whangarei. And yeah, it's a picture of a fairly big kiwi, this one, that basically decided to wander into a sawmill and had a surprise visitor in their workshop whilst they were cutting wood in a sawmill. Presumably exactly what they're doing there, was a full-grown kiwi. Lucas James, a Sparky at Roseville Sawmill, said that the kiwi wandered into the mill on Monday and spent a few hours exploring before seeking out a dark spot under a workbench.
Okay.
I was still bleary-eyed early in the morning and was using the drill press in the workshop when I heard a scuttle behind me. I turned around and there was a big kiwi running around in the middle of the workshop. So I called all the guys and we had a look and sort of panicked. We didn't know what to do. They've also included a picture of the kiwi racing across the floor. They closed the workshop doors to stop it wandering into any machinery, and then called for a few experts from the local Department of Conservation. They've turned up and they've taken the kiwi and have released it back out into the wild for it to go back. But yeah, it was a decent sized kiwi that you can see them carrying out there.
Oh wow, yeah, okay.
Big bird.
Yeah. That's a big bird for a small bird, isn't it?
Yeah.
My next article comes to us from phys.org. First report of wound treatment by a wild animal using pain-relieving plant. So whilst evidence exists for animals using self-medicating behaviors, never before has an animal using plants to heal a wound been documented. So biologists from the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior in Germany and the Universitas Nasional in Indonesia recorded the Sumatran orangutan.
Sumatran what?
Orangutan.
Orangutan?
Orangutan. I heard Sir David Attenborough pronounce it that way, and that's good enough for me now.
Okay.
Orangutan. Orangutan. Basically, this bloke was chewing up sap before applying it to a facial wound. In the
decent
picture,
wound as well.
A nasty wound. Yeah. Doesn't look nice.
No.
The sap coming from a climbing plant with pain relieving and anti-inflammatory properties. So very cool.
Yeah. And my final article is also from the BBC, and it's also about people facing justice for messing with nature. Man addicted to collecting birds' eggs is sentenced. And this is a self-described egg-collecting addict has been handed a suspended jail sentence for illegally amassing a collection of almost 3,000 wild bird eggs. That's 3,000 bird eggs.
Jesus.
Daniel Lingham, 71, was caught on wildlife cameras in June taking nightjar eggs, which in itself is just horrendous, from a nature reserve near Holt in Norfolk. Thousands more eggs were found when officers searched his home, and basically he admitted 5 offences in February and was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison, suspended for 18 months. To be honest, that's almost nothing for doing such a thing. He claimed the eggs at his home were there from an old collection he'd had in storage when police last raided his address, and from a collection he was given from a friend in Essex, he said. Of the 2,995 found, 548 were from native birds on the amber list for conservation concern, and a further 546 were almost of serious concern on the red list, including linnets, greenfinch, yellowhammers, house sparrows. The court has basically heard. So in his house, he has a collection of eggs that were so unbelievably rare and of significance. He's probably depleted a good number of birds in that local area. The collection of eggs was
eggs?
Oh, it gets better as well. I almost should have done this one as the main article for this week. It was found behind a bath panel, so they weren't being displayed or anything. He knew that this was illegal. Being held behind a bath panel, including a box containing a pair of nightjar eggs, which were labelled Nightjar 2, Holt Lows, 9th of January. So they were basically his own personal trophy collection. And I don't see the point in things like this. Bird eggs are very, very pretty, but most of them are really boring.
How do you get addicted to collecting eggs? Like,
the best thing is the actual bird.
And go,
oh man, I love these.
Oh, I like this egg.
Aaron, be careful. You've got that ostrich egg.
Yeah, that egg is a buddy of mine. Oh, not taking that.
No, well, you may break in for it. But yes, that's guy who's addicted to eggs.
Oh man, stick to Pokemon cards. Some people. Moving on swiftly. This one comes to us from Sci News, and it's the news that saber-toothed tigers.
Did it actually say saber-toothed
tigers? It says saber-toothed tigers.
Oh, really?
Every
Come
time
on, Sci News.
Shudder. Saber-toothed tigers held onto their milk teeth to stabilize their sabers, studies suggest. By sabers, because of the nature of that headline, I feel I should explain. By sabers, what they mean is the elongated canine teeth, not that they're actually
Holding a sword.
hoarding like some sword,
like some sort of egg
craftsmanship.
holder.
Yeah, I hate the headline, but aside from that, researchers have found evidence to suggest that the deciduous teeth, so the milk teeth, of saber-toothed cats may have actually stayed in place longer to stabilize the permanent secondary sabers as they developed, ensuring teenaged hunters could hone their craft without damaging their teeth. And the picture is pretty impressive. It shows Smilodon with essentially 4 elongated canines, which just makes a monstrous animal even more that terrifying, I think.
Yeah.
And if he's got an egg that he's eating, try collecting that off him. But yeah, that just about wraps it up for this week's installment of the Natural History Covered Newsreel. Remember, if you guys at home have articles or topics of interest that you think we should discuss here, or should at least be part of the headline section, you can send them in. You can use any of the usual methods, the social media accounts, email account, or you could try some odd methods like sending a stampede of thunder cows through to us, or
I still think pigeon or smoke signals would be the best thing.
smoke signal, didgeridoo.
Find Aaron's cat, attach a small note to it.
Yeah, leave my cat alone.
No, yeah.
And you may hear your chosen topic or news article covered here, or in the main discussion, which is on Gareth this week.
Yeah.
And what is the topic?
So, you've heard of leprosy?
No.
No?
Yes, I've heard of leprosy.
Right, okay. I was going to say, didn't want to have to go into that. Right, so this one comes yet again from the BBC News. They've had a good selection of things this week. And the main bulk of it is squirrels may have given medieval Britons leprosy. Now, can you tell me, Aaron, what mammal is responsible for spreading leprosy to humans in only a few parts of the world? In fact, only a very restricted part of the world, actually.
Yeah, armadillos.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when we think of leprosy, there's usually only one animal you tend to think of, and that's the 9-banded armadillo.
Yeah.
Not any of the others. It's just that one species. It has the potential to catch and carry and pass on leprosy to humans. It's a zoonotic disease in that sense, but very limited in its scope. Well, new research has basically shown that medieval Britons may have actually had leprosy spread to them by squirrels.
Right.
Now, we're talking our proper squirrels here, red squirrels,
right?
Because in the medieval period, that's the only squirrel you would have encountered. But humans may have caught leprosy from squirrels in medieval times, new research has basically pointed out. They've studied human and red squirrel bones from a site in Winchester, which is quite a nice town to go to and has a lot of medieval.
I graduated in Winchester.
Yeah, it's a lovely place. And they found
Wessex.
True. And they found they had closely related strains of bacteria that cause leprosy on the squirrel bones, and it matched to an extent some of the human bones that were discarded in special leprosy burial grounds, essentially.
Right.
That matched. So there's a thought that red squirrels were passing this strain of leprosy to humans. Now, it's a chronic disease that is pretty horrific, actually.
Yeah.
It's infectious between humans. It attacks the skin, the nervous system, mucous membranes, and no one is thought to have caught it inside the UK for at least 70 years, which is actually kind of it's a very small gap.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a big gap between now and the medieval period, but it's still endemic in many parts of the world. Hence the 9-banded armadillo being one of those that can spread it. And it does draw to that fact later on in the article. But it's thought that some modern day red squirrels in the UK, I'm doing different voices this week. It's thought that some red squirrels in the UK have actually got a strain of leprosy on them. So it's there. It's just we may have sort of got rid of it because we kind of killed off most of our squirrels.
Right.
But the finding of leprosy in modern squirrels was surprising, and it's incredible that it was found also in the medieval period, said the study's co-author, Dr. Sarah Inskip of the University of Leicester. It really goes against the narrative that was a human disease spread specifically by humans to other humans. There may be squirrels in the mix. And it gets more interesting as to squirrels being in the mix, because I was unaware of this, but squirrels were actually quite a popular pet for women of nobility during the medieval period. Instead of having a cat or a dog, you'd have a pet squirrel.
Why not? Why not?
I could see that. They're fun little animals. There's people who keep squirrels as pets. I kind of would prefer a rat personally, but that's more me. But it would appear that this shared strain suggests that it circulated between people and animals in the Middle Ages in a way that hadn't been detected before, this research has said. There's also another area that was overlooked as well, is that squirrel fur in itself was used for a lot of linings of coats and hoods and things. There's a good chance that, people catching and preparing squirrel pelts may have also come into contact with it. But the human remains were found in a what was called a leprosorium, which is a hospital for people with leprosy.
Yeah.
Basically a place for them to go and well, in the medieval era just die, probably. But yes, these studies have basically found that modern squirrels from Scotland and Brantesy Island off the coast can carry and have carried leprosy. So
wow.
Yeah, interesting in the same way that we're looking at these animals, and we want to obviously increase their numbers and get them back to where they should be. That this should be of no way of discouraging us from doing that. But it's interesting to think that it may be a disease that we've sort of kind of wiped out to an extent because of just the introduction of the grey squirrel.
But I wonder what that impact would have had on on health and medicine at that time.
Yeah.
Also, it does stand to reason, like when you think of the further you encroach into the rainforests, the more pathogens we come across that we've never come across before.
That's going to happen more and more with climate change as well, and intensification of agriculture and things like that.
This is not really unprecedented. We're coming across an animal that we haven't come across in a long time, and we're finding that they carry diseases that we haven't come across in a respectable amount of time. I wouldn't say 70 years is a long time.
Well, it's a good reason to not try and pick up a wild animal.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there we go. That's the news for this week. Shall we head on into this week's creature feature, which also, I believe, features a European mammal of sorts.
Another European animal that you might want to stay at a respectful distance from. Yeah.
Not so much disease-wise.
No. More, I will crush you. Kind of thing.
It's the creature feature.
Right, well, we're into this week's creature feature. Aaron, what are we looking at?
So this week, Gareth, we are looking at a very special animal, I think. It's an animal that reaches heights of just over 2 meters and pushes lengths of 4.2 meters. So pretty hefty animal. Weighs in excess of 920 kilograms.
Nice. So big animal.
Big animal. This week's creature feature is Europe's heaviest remaining land animal. And it is, of course, the European bison. Or more correctly, in my opinion, the wisent. That's what I think I like to call them myself. It may, in fact, historically have been even bigger than that, actually. So
are we talking auroch size or
pushing it? Yeah. They've got a bit of a complicated history, actually, which we'll get into, because that's probably, apart from the fact that they are just very cool looking, very prehistoric looking. I mean, when there are a few animals around today that kind of conjure when you're next to them, kind of conjure a feeling of prehistory.
Yeah.
Other than I think your wisent or the bison,
Mhm.
bison too. Your Amur tiger,
Yeah.
because that is a beast. And polar bears. I think those three.
I'd
There's
throw in
something
there.
about that.
I'd throw in there Saiga antelope as well.
Yes.
Not as
yeah.
many people are aware of those, but
Also I was going to say I've never been close to one.
No, I've never seen one either.
No, the other three, the wisent, polar bears, and Amur tigers. I've worked with two of those species, so it's they are very prehistoric, or at least they give me a vibe of prehistory when I'm close to them, I think. But yeah, like I say, probably the most, apart from their appearance, probably the most interesting thing about wisent is actually their history. They have a very long history with regards to their coexistence with humans and their evolution, which I mean, I guess, is to be expected when you consider the European bison's American cousin.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get into that now, because is a tale of sadness. It has been a struggle for them before the successes of today, or that have led to today's population increases at least. But I won't labor too much over the details of their appearance, because we kind of all know what a bison is, and so we kind of all know what a wisent looks like. But just in case you never knew that Europe had its own bison species, and you wanted a brief summary of what they look like, they are essentially the owners of the quintessential bison body plan. They look very much like their American cousins, with a few differences. By the way, did you know that there are actually two species of American bison?
I think I did. The plains bison.
Yes.
And bison.
The wood bison.
No, I was being silly.
Oh, sorry.
And bison.
That went straight over my head.
How do you tell the difference between a buffalo and a bison?
It's taken me this long in recording this episode to realize that I have an antenna sticking out of my head. Look at that.
But yeah, the wood bison.
The wood bison, yeah. Wood bison and the plains bison are its American cousins. And they are the two species that will be making up part 2 of this creature feature later in the year, or possibly into next year. But yeah, so going over those quick differences, the main differences between Europe's wisent and America's bison are mostly in body proportions. So bison, probably obvious, they have much more body mass.
Yeah, they're chunkier.
They're chunkier, heavier. But wisent are taller. And not a lot of people realize that.
Leggy like the owl from last week.
Yes, very much so. Now, bison are fluffier with thicker, longer fur covering the head and the neck and the forelimbs here. But wisent, as you've just said, they have longer legs and hairier tails, and they actually have more formidable horns.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's actually a horn difference. So with wisent, the horns are kind of more straight-ish. They're a bit straighter. They're oriented ever so slightly differently, because they've evolved for slightly different purposes. So whereas the bison competition during rutting season relies on them charging each other, wisent wrestle each other. So they kind of lock horns and wrestle.
A bit more deer-like.
Yeah. A lot more deer-like. Now, when the neck is in a neutral position, the wisent's nose is actually further forward than that of the bison in relation to the rest of their facial features. So there's another little bit of a difference. Now, if you were to look into the physiology of bison and wisent, what you would find is that bison have 15 pairs of ribs, whereas wisents only have 14. So there's another physiological difference. And behaviorally, they're subtly different too. So bison graze more than wisent do, although they are both grazers. And wisent browse more than bison do. And even though the wood bison will also browse, and that's probably a behavior that's come about from
habitat
trends. The habitat, preferences have created trends in feeding that have led to adaptations. A little bit like, I would say, white rhino and black rhino.
Yeah.
But not to the same extent,
No,
where they got
that's-
different mouthpieces. So yeah. Actually, on that, all three species predominantly graze, actually. And the average male adult will consume about 32 kilograms of food a day. So that's a heck of a lot.
Decent amount.
A lot of food. And this is basically preparation during the season of plenty before we go into the colder seasons. Now that I've noticed the antenna, it's bugging me.
Just pretend it's not there.
Yeah, I'm picking up.
I'll get some scissors.
Beep, 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 beep. So wisent are also far less tameable than bison. Not that I've ever considered either species tameable in the least. But apparently bison are a little bit more malleable, or a little bit more tolerant of humans than wisent are. And this has actually led to the fact that, I think we touched on this with the auroch to a degree, bison were easier to breed with domestic cattle than wisent were. So yeah, there's that. Bison are also faster than wisent, but wisent can jump higher and further, probably down to those leggy legs.
Not what I would have pictured them doing either. It's not an animal I think of as being a natural born jumper as such.
There may well be somewhere in history and time where people didn't count sheep jumping over gates, so you counted wisent. Jumping over. Yeah, that would excite me more than I think that would be pretty fun to watch, actually. But yeah, no, this is actually, in all seriousness, probably due to the terrain again. Behavioral adaptation to the environment that they live in. So with wisent, we're not really talking historically. We're not really talking so much woods and plains. We're talking more mountainous regions, hilly regions, rocky regions, and such. So yeah, there's that. And that really is all the description that I feel I need to give on wisent, to be honest. You know enough to know that they're slightly different from bison and in these ways, but you also know that they essentially look like a bison. Equally, I doubt when I come to do bison later, I doubt I'm going to go over the differences again, because we've covered
just
it
say
now.
sea wisent, chunkier.
Yeah. Now, one thing that bison and wisent definitely have in common is the undeniably fascinating history that I kind of alluded to at the top of this creature feature,
and that weaves into our previous aurochs feature, which I'd recommend people to go and check out for its very dark history. Yeah,
it does have a dark history, and actually there's a few characters in that make a return in this creature feature.
Oh, shocking.
Yes. So we'll save the bison story for its own creature feature, because bison have, like I say, equally fascinating history as the wisent do, but also very different. Because now you're dealing with the Native Americans, the First Nation peoples, sorry, and you're also dealing with settlers and all that, and how they were saved, because both bison and wisent essentially came back from the brink of oblivion. Which, I mean, we've used that term. Certainly, I've used that term in the past on this podcast, but in the case of bison, it is 100% true. They really did not have a good time of it. So we'll save the bison for the history, for the bison episode. But in terms of wisent here in Europe, a couple of questions for you right off the bat, Gareth.
Okay.
Firstly, do you know which of the three species was first called bison? And secondly, do you know who gave them that name? I'm covering my notes, which I'm still working off.
All right, hang on. I'll make it easier for you. There you go.
Oh, wait.
Definitely can't read. I am going to say it's a... I'm probably going to say it's the European bison, because I'm going to hedge my bets and say it's Carl Linnaeus.
Carl Linnaeus, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I'm probably going to be totally wrong.
No, you 50% there, 50% on your grade there, Gareth.
Good.
So yeah, perhaps surprisingly, the European wisent was the one that was first called bison. So the wisent is actually, even though I
It
say
is the bison.
wisent is the correct name, bison is actually its first name. That is the name it was first called, and it was so called originally, at least, by one of my favorite civilizations.
Oh, it's going to be Pliny, isn't it?
It's
It's the Greeks, clearly.
It is the Greeks.
Is it Pliny?
It's not Pliny. No.
Asclepius?
No.
Hercules?
Heracles.
Heracles.
So yeah, it's one of my favorite civilizations, the ancient Greeks. Also one of my least favorite civilizations, the Romans. Not keen on the Romans.
What they ever done for us?
So basically, the second century AD, Anno Domini, authors Pausanias called them. Now, this is I'm going to try and speak in ancient Greek. It's very similar to bison, but it's bisoun.
Bisoun.
Bisoun. Oh no, sorry, no, it's bison. Bison.
Just sounds French now.
Yeah. So Pausanias called them bison in Greek, whilst another author by the name of Oppian, in true Roman fashion, bastardized the Greek name into bison, as in which should be pronounced bisoun. Sorry, not bison.
Buy them soon.
The Greeks were calling them bison, and the Romans were calling them bisoun. Yeah, bisoun. Casting our net further back into history, at least in terms of etymology, during the 4th century BC, we come to Hellenic Greece, where Aristotle himself referenced them, naming them. Now this is the part that's actually going to be difficult to pronounce. Bonasus, which is similar to the second part of their scientific name. That's where that comes from.
I don't actually know their scientific name, and I don't think you've mentioned it yet.
We'll get to that in a minute, I think. I hope. So Aristotle also makes reference to the name given to the species by Paeonian peoples, who called it Monapos.
Monapos.
Yes. Other writers of the early AD centuries tended to prefer the Roman name and the elder Hellenic name. So Bisoun Bonasus. And that's the scientific name.
There we go.
Bison Bonasus. But if we fast forward to the 18th century, the term bison has well and truly stuck, but was then beginning to be applied to its cousins in America, as well as the Indian gua.
Yeah, I can see that.
The domestic zebu. It's also at this time that wisent are scarce, and as a result, nowadays, because of their scarcity at that time, we now, when we think of bison, we think of the American ones, which is why American ones are bison, and why I argue that the European ones are wisent. There is more etymology to that as to why I think they should remain wisent as opposed to bison. But yeah, unfortunately this glosses over another name, and that's this. Now we're going to get into wisent a bit. The name that I use comes to us not from the Latin roots of the English language, but from its Germanic roots. So the early medieval English named it Wisend, or sorry, Wiesend. So it was named Wisend.
Wisend.
Yes, Wisend. And this is a corruption of the Proto-Germanic name Wisand, which should be pronounced Wisand.
Yeah.
Which is itself related to the Old Norse name Visundr. How it came back to us after the name bison was adopted is that we basically borrowed it back from the word in modern German languages, which is Weisend.
Works. Yeah.
So Weisend. So yeah, a lot of names. So we'll keep moving. We're going to delve into some of that history that we've been talking about now. Wisents are nothing if not historically fascinating. I've said that several times already. The early evolution of the wisent, however, is somewhat complicated. Their skeletal appearance is very, very similar. If you were just looking at skeletons, the European wisent is nearly identical to the steppe bison. And they overlap a little bit in terms of time and geography.
Yeah.
And so when they find them side by side, they don't know who's who. Or when they find them in ranges that are side by side, they don't know who's who. So yeah,
they're Ice Age cousin, basically.
Yes, they're Ice Age cousin. It's very difficult to tell them apart when they're together just in skeletal form. So yeah, that's it's a mid. So the steppe bison is a mid Pleistocene species, and aside from that near identical anatomy to the wisent, it's actually the ancestor of all American bison.
Ah.
So yeah, that's our two modern American species now, but there would have been more beforehand. So the steppe bison, as I say, it inhabited Europe before the wisent appeared in the late Pleistocene. So they basically had from the mid Pleistocene to the late Pleistocene to themselves, but then in the late Pleistocene, their cousins, the European wisent, come along. And so there, like I say, there's this overlap in time and geography, time and space. The wisent themselves can actually be divided up into two different lineages. Now, one lineage actually has gone completely extinct, so they're not around anymore, and that happened at the end of the late Pleistocene.
Let me guess, they were the British ones.
I actually don't know where they come from, to be honest. But basically, late Pleistocene, they disappear, and then at the very end of the last glacial stage of the ice age that we're in, that's when the steppe bison disappeared.
Yeah.
And that leaves in Europe more opportunity to fill the bison niche by the European wisent.
Which I imagine the aurochs probably stepped in a bit of that as well.
I would have thought so, yes, yeah.
Because they were still around for that little bit longer after that.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, all the European wisent that you see around today, they are all from the second lineage of European wisent, the lineage that survived. So yeah. Now, historically, wisent would have enjoyed a vast range of European lowland, from the Massif Central in France to the Volga River in Russia via Eastern Europe. It may also have been found in the British Isles. However, there isn't what's the word?
Direct evidence?
There's not direct evidence. Yeah, there's not been direct evidence.
So a little bit like the European tree frog.
Yes.
The suspicion is there that they were there.
And we have all the reason to believe so.
Yeah, but they haven't got the exact evidence to prove it.
There was a land bridge between Europe and the British Isles called Doggerland, and they have been found from that region.
That would make perfect sense that they'd be here then.
Yeah, there's no real reason. It's just like the issue is with fossilization is, as Gareth, you can explain this far better than I can, I reckon. But I have covered it in the T-Rex creature feature. It's a Tyrannosaurus Rex creature feature, and also one episode where I covered the news that they think they pretty accurately modeled and estimated Tyrannosaurus Rex population densities, and we covered just how lucky you have to be to be fossilized, because it's the perfect conditions, and not just perfect conditions in the moment. It's perfect conditions from the moment you die and the nature in which you die to the time that you're found. You have to survive that time as a fossil.
Yeah, and it's down to the habitat the animal dies in, the sediment that they die in, the presence of predators and scavengers, the local climate conditions, and then the rocks themselves. If the rocks just all of a sudden start crunching up against another set of rocks over geological time, that fossil is just either warped or destroyed in the process. And even then, even if you get millions of years into the future, you might end up just being eroded away before someone chips that piece of rock away and finds that fossil. So the numbers are astronomical, and to be found is obviously really quite an amazing thing. But for something like a bison, which has only recently gone extinct, I suppose, it's more a case of a lot of those bones may not have even had the chance to fossilize, and they may have just rotted away like so many other bones of animals do right the way throughout the countryside.
Yeah. And also one thing that that wisent carcasses had to contend with that tyrannosaur carcasses didn't.
Is it humans?
Humans, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, and we would have scavenged from them certainly. Like no one's going to pass up
Is that a dead animal over
a free meal, energy free meal, or these days financially free meal. Not that I'm gonna
there? Go out and poach a bison?
there's a red deer that's been hit down the road. I shouldn't laugh, but yeah, I'm not gonna go jump
No,
on that and
let's,
start chewing.
let's not go have roadkill for tea.
There is another place that very much like the British Isles, we think that wisent were present there, but we haven't yet found them, and that's in the kind of more Asiatic reaches of the Russian Federation. So that's like a long way off from Europe as we go. Now, basically, as the human populations of Europe increased and spread, so too did the wisent populations decrease and fragment and lose a lot of territory. Actually, it appears to have still been relatively common during the time of Aristotle, but the animal stops being referenced in that historic European region of antiquity around the 3rd century BC. After that, references sort of trail off and then completely stop, which is a shame. But this seems to be the pattern everywhere in Europe. Around that time, people stopped talking about them so much, and presumably because the species was becoming less and less numerous as the centuries tick by at an alarming rate. So it's not until 1513 that we start to bring them back into historical relevance. And this seems to be kind of their last stand, their last chance to survive. It seems to be that their final holdout, their final refuge, was a place in Poland, a kind of Poland and Lithuania kind of area, which I'm now going to butcher the name of because I'm reading it here thinking...
I think I butchered it when we got to the Aurochs one as well, because this would be the same forest.
Bialowice?
I can't remember actually, but yeah.
Bialowice forest. And basically the reason they survived there is because of the protection afforded them by the Lithuanian and Polish royalty.
Yeah.
So basically the Grand Dukes of Lithuania and the Polish royal family were the ones
as a hunting reserve, I'm guessing.
No, actually, they recognized that they were disappearing. So in fact, one such royal figure, King Sigismund II Augustus, ruled that poachers of wisent will be given the death penalty.
Sensible policy for a sensible country. I like
it. Maybe in that day, yes. But not today. I think that's important to say because people might be freaking out when I say that. Because I mean, I can understand why you'd want to kill the poacher, but most of the time, poachers in Africa and Asia, they're not often they're usually the very impoverished people.
Yeah. They're the ones at the hard end of it.
Yeah, they're being offered a decent wage by people higher up in other places such as China, who are wanting these things poached and smuggled across borders.
Yeah,
very well protected wisent, and they were protected right up until the mid 17th century. In 1701, King Augustus II actually afforded the herds even more protection than ever, even partitioning some meadows in the region as winter food for the bison herds.
Wow.
How great is that?
I was wondering where you were going to go with
sectioning off. Is that I mean, that's 1701, and it's only 2024 when the royal family in Britain have finally said, I think we'll put a little bit of our woodland to one side to have a little bit of wildlife there.
Never too late, I suppose. Although, wait, I suppose it is.
Yeah. Now, when Russian Tsars replaced the Lithuanian and Polish rulers in the area, they kept that protection in place, or at least they did in word, because they basically made the local inhabitants peasants, and the herd declined greatly over the course of the century.
Mostly because I'm guessing people were hungry and had nothing else to eat.
Yeah, and also probably could fetch money across borders.
Yeah.
Because it was only in this area where they were protected.
Yeah.
And now there wasn't a king saying that you're going to be you're going to be beheaded if you kill
Yeah.
this thing. So yeah, yeah. So not great, and unfortunately, it only gets worse from there, because then we come to minor important events in human history. So we come to World War One and Two.
Fair enough.
Yeah, not a good time for people, and not a good time for Weissen.
Not a good time for many things.
Not a good time for anybody anywhere, really. So yeah, I just defined the Białowież forest as this last haven for the Wisent during the Middle Ages, through to modernity. Well, that's not going to last, because German troops that are occupying the area now are going to shoot them for fun. They're also going to shoot them to feed themselves, and shoot them for the pelts. So yeah, not good at all, really. And then what happens is some German scientists have the good sense to realize that there is a problem here, and these animals are going extinct. So they tell the army officers to, like, you gotta bring your boys back in line here, stop shooting, because they're going to disappear.
So that at least somebody made note of that.
Yeah, somebody had some modicum of sense during that horrendous period in time. Unfortunately, and this is in World War One, by the way, we're talking World War One this moment in time. Unfortunately, when the German troops leave the area, when they retreat, they actually shoot all of them.
Of course, because why
So-
not?
So yeah, the scientists basically advised military personnel of the imminent extinction of the European Wisent. But by the end of World War One, soldiers shot nearly the entire population of the area, leaving only 9 alive. By 1921, none survived in Poland, which is where that forest is that was the last haven for them.
Jeez.
And they were basically killed. Quite frankly, from what I can glean, these last ones were shot essentially for fun and out of spite. That's why these guys were shot in the end. The last wild living Wisent would be shot by poachers not 6 years later. So yeah, terrible thing. So Gareth, a couple more questions for you. Do you have any idea how many Wisent were left in the world, and do you have any idea where they were?
Well, if those were the last ones in Poland, I'll take the glasses off again, so I can't possibly cheat. You're saying those were the last ones in Poland?
Yes.
Okay, so my thought would be adjacent to Poland, we've got Germany.
Okay.
This is my European geography's gone out the window. Is Czechoslovakia? Is that? I apologize to all Czechoslovakian and Polish listeners for me butchering where things are. I'm being very British at this point. Trying to think of countries that border it, but I'm actually gonna say Russia.
Russia?
Yeah, because that's border. Or I'm gonna say Ukraine. Actually, I'm gonna say Ukraine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, actually, it would. And do you want to take a stab at how many were left?
20 or 30. Go with 30.
Actually, you didn't do too badly there. There were only 48 left.
Wow.
In the entire world.
And where were they?
They were all held in zoos.
Ah.
all of them were
so extinct
zoos.
in the wild then.
Yes. Luckily, in August of 1923, the International Society for the Preservation of the Wisent was founded by none other than their first chairman, Kurt Priemel, Frankfurt Zoo's director at the time. So when you said Germany, I thought I might give you a point.
Yeah. Germany in zoos.
He basically consolidated experts in the field, as well as conservation groups and local people, and private individuals, because what happened with the
land is going to be needed.
Exactly. Yeah. And basically they took stock of the current state of the Wisent population in captivity and came up with a breeding program. Now this was based on a very similar breeding program that was undertaken to save the American bison. And that one, do you know what that one was based on?
It's going to be something circular, isn't it? It's going to be like that was based on a European one, which was based on a North American one, which I'm gonna say
It's actually I will say it's a bit of a trick question, and it's obvious.
a bit of a trick question that's obvious.
Because it's not obvious, but when I tell you it, you'd kick yourself. It's that kind of answer.
Is it going to be the Pear David's deer?
It's not, but it's not, and you're actually quite far off.
Okay, well, fine.
I was figuring I'll play it out like you got it close, but no. So the European Wisent's breeding program was based on the American Bison's breeding program. The American Bison's breeding program was the first breeding program created for wild animals.
Is it going to be a domestic animal, isn't it?
Wild animals. It is. It's none other than racehorses.
It makes
came
sense
from the equid industry because they had such a grasp of genetics for all their racehorses, and it still goes on today. Their racehorses, the way that they're bred, who's selected for who, that had a foundation that was like, for whatever you want to say about pedigree dogs, selective breeding, line breeding, and all that, whatever you want to say about it, and in the equid world as well. The skeleton of that breeding program, it lays a foundation for something amazing. The concept is brilliant. That is what all animals in all good, functional, healthy, thriving zoos, their breeding programs are based on those. They're based on racehorse breeding program. So brilliant, basically. Now Primel's vision was basically pure conservation. He wanted to keep the lines pure, so he wanted to avoid inbreeding as much as possible, but keep wisent and not bring in
make wisents great again.
It very much. He wanted to keep them true wisents. The disadvantage to that approach is that it is an incredibly slow approach. Worth it, but incredibly slow. He did have opposition for this reason, or rather, perhaps I should say a rival in someone we've very familiar with.
Would it be anyone with the last name Heck?
Oh yeah,
chance?
Mr. or should I say Herr Lutz Heck. He basically planned to run a separate breeding program, and his was a bit more maverick. He had the intention to crossbreed bison, American bison, with wisent to basically make a much bigger, much more formidable animal for him and his mates to hunt.
Of course.
And get their jollies. So one was conservation based, the other was ego hunting trip kind of based. And it is Lutz who
a little bit of Nazi sprinkled in there as well.
Yeah, it's Lutz who will bring us into the World War II chapter of Wisent history, because he basically wrote a letter to his equally greedy and grubby mate Hermann Göring, promising to provide surplus stock for them to hunt. So again, he wasn't breeding for conservation; he was breeding for nefarious reasons. Now, we've discussed this chapter before in relation to aurochs.
Yeah.
So I'll be relatively brief.
In fact, I would say what I would say is pause the video or the audio now as to whatever you're listening to. Go and listen to that one, and then fill in, and then come back to this one, because it would fill in a nice little gap there.
Yes,
actually.
Yeah.
Because I did focus a bit more on the shall we say the Nazi aspect of the aurochs, which fits neatly with the dark Nazi aspect of these guys as well.
Yeah, unfortunately so. I will summarize this historical stain by saying that basically this effort was called out from the beginning for its unscientific approach, and it was named in the moral plan by none other actually than Primel, the guy who was trying to conserve this species. He labeled it vain as well. Now Heck threatened Primel with action. He actually said that he and Göring would take action should he continue to oppose their plans, and as a result, Primel was banned from writing anything about European wisent.
Which is what scientific rigor needs: is you ban the person you don't like.
Well, and at the time, I mean, this is around 1937, so you can imagine this is
white comes
politics, like stamping down and crushing science. Something that happened.
No, we never see that today.
a
That
few
never
years
happens.
ago, wasn't it?
You never see that happen today.
Yeah. So at the same time, the society for the International Society for the Protection of the Wisent, their bookkeeper was basically stripped of their responsibilities and their documents. These were given over to Lutz's version of it, which is the Professional Association of Wisent Breeders and Hedgers or Hedgers. I don't know how to pronounce that word. But yeah, that's where that stood at the end of the 1930s. Luckily, thanks in large part to the International Society for the Preservation of the Wisent, the captive breeding programs succeeded, and they ran through zoos and other collections, and it's enjoyed a population increase from the 1920s. So I'm gonna kind of focus on this screen a bit more intensely for me, because I'm going to rapid fire some history. So the Wisent has enjoyed a population increase, as I said, since the 1920s. In 1929, a pair were released back into that final stronghold they had in Białowieża Forest in Poland. Just over 30 years later, in 1964, that number had increased to 100.
That's pretty good.
Through breeding and through the breeding programs themselves. After that, thanks to Polish authorities and international efforts, the forest is now once again the location with the most Wisent in the world. So that's really good. Numbers in 2014 suggested that there were 1,434 Wisent in Poland alone. 1,212 of these were wild, and 522 of those live in that forest. So they've done really, really well.
That's a really good turnaround.
And what's even better is Poland are no longer alone. Poland and the zoos on the captive breeding program have managed to get more animals out to more countries, more of their historic range. I'll run through those right now. So basically, Austria, there are 10 Wisent in Austria. In Azerbaijan, there's 29. Belarus has 1,962.
Wow.
Yeah. Bulgaria has 150 in the northeast, but there's another smaller herd that exists elsewhere, and I couldn't find exactly where, and I couldn't find exactly the number. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. The Czech Republic has 106. Denmark has 21 in Lillevilmus, and 7 on Bornholm Island. I hope I've pronounced those places correctly. France actually has 50, which is more than what I thought France would have.
I wouldn't have thought France would have any, but yeah, it's not bad.
Germany, they have numbers, but I'm not actually.
They have numbers.
Yeah, they have numbers. But I put a little asterisk with it because I think they could do. I think Germany could do better. Germany have, excuse me, 26, and these are confined to a fenced national park. So 26 is a nice number. National park, great. However, they are fenced in. They're not free roaming. And Germany, when I say you could do better, you're doing light years better than the UK are. So you keep doing you. There is just one thing I have to pull you guys up on, and that is that there was one truly wild bison in Germany.
Was it an escape from a zoo? Was it
an escapee of sorts, but not from a zoo? He was from Poland, and he was the.
I'd wandered over the border.
He was the first ever individual for 850 years.
Wow!
To swim across that river and enter German lands, and the German authorities demanded that it was shot.
Why?
Couldn't find a reason other than the only thing that I could find.
They didn't want any invading bison?
No, it seems to be a concern over the safety of people, which it's a little bit nonsense. One bison, Germany is.
Did it have a murderous look in its eyes, or what?
Have you ever seen Santa's Sleigh?
It's
Santa's Sleigh is one of my favorite Christmas spoof movies, where Santa is played by Bill Goldberg from WCW, and basically
you realise I've got to find a picture of Bill Goldberg now and put that up behind.
in his trunks.
It'll be there.
So yeah, Bill Goldberg plays Santa in it. He's basically Satan's son. He lost a bet with an angel over a game of curling, and as a result, he had to spend 2,000 years. Spoilers, but it's been out for years. He has to spend 2,000 years being nice to people and giving people presents at Christmas. When those 2,000 years are up, he ditches the reindeer and his sleigh is pulled by fire-breathing wisent.
I like it.
It's brilliant with red eyes and it's great. But yeah, unfortunately, go back to serious stuff now.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Unfortunately, Germany shot the only wild wisent that they'd had for 850 years, and not only that, but that wisent naturally crossed borders, which that's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That was such a success for Poland, and Germany could have made it their success by welcoming it and coming up with policies that would protect their people and their animals. So yeah, that's my one gripe with Germany, but you're still doing better than the UK are. So we move on to Hungary. There are 11 in a national park, and then there's another herd somewhere else. And quite like Bulgaria, I can't actually find where that other herd is.
Is this
nor
a
how many there are.
hidden herd?
I think it might be a more wild herd.
Okay.
And the numbers aren't there. So then Italy, there's no reliable data on the number, but they're near Verona. Lithuania has 214. Moldova has 3. Netherlands possibly 66. I say that because they're spread in different places, and the numbers fluctuate. Poland has 2,048 truly wild.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's an impressive number.
Poland have done really well. Historically, they've done so well with those wisent. It's amazing.
Please tell me that they're Poland's national animal.
Spoilers. Damn it.
Well, if they put it this way, if they weren't, they deserve to be.
No, they've put in a lot of effort for them, and they deserve to have the national animal. We will get to that in a minute. Moving on to Romania, they have 160. Russia has possibly 1,588. I say
they've got the land.
They've got the land, but they also have the type of politics that doesn't always tell the truth.
True.
We can't be demonetized for that, can we?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Come at us, Russia.
Please don't say that. Serbia, let's move on, has 5. Spain has 100 plus, 100 give or take, I should say. Spain actually was one of the more recent ones. In fact, I think one of the recent re-releases ended up with people poaching some of the. I think there were 7 sent from zoos in Ireland, possibly Ireland. Don't quote me on that, but there were zoos in the UK, at least. So the UK and Ireland sent, I think, 7 wisent out to Spain, and poachers got most, if not all of them.
Well, that's depressing. This is just an up and down depressing.
But they do have 100, give or take, there. So that,
okay,
we'll end that one on a positive. Sweden has 139. Switzerland has 51 truly wild, 5 semi-wild. Ukraine, that you mentioned earlier, doing very well, 400.
How are they doing at the moment? That would be my other.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but hopefully they're all right.
Because personally, I could see history repeating itself there with Russian soldiers doing the same thing to them as they retreat from areas or they move through areas. Because, well, let's face it, I mean, soldiers are soldiers at the end of the day, and a lot of them don't really care too much about wildlife or things like that, and you end up with
at least not
those
whilst they're on the job. At least not whilst they're on the job.
No, and I can understand that people are charged up, and I can even understand people accidentally shooting one, or blowing one up with some sort of ordnance of some sort. But when people do it for fun, because they're just sick, then that's when I have a major issue with it.
Well, in World War One, when they moved out, when they vacated the region, that was
just sick.
By all accounts, that was spite and just for fun. And then last but not least, because there are countries that had less than us, but at least those countries, lesser numbers, were truly wild. The UK have 5 semi-wild.
Yeah, they're in a large reserve down in Kent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Large by UK standards.
Yeah, I mean, not to sort of glorify Britain, but I think the ones that we've got here, we've had one born as well.
Yes,
and it's all relatively recent that they've sort of set up.
That being said, we can't take credit for it being born in the wild.
No, because
it turned out it was impregnated at the zoo it came from.
Yeah,
and they didn't know. So yeah, so we'll move on.
It's a start.
It's a start. It's a start. And I think have they introduced the bull? I'm pretty sure they introduced the bull.
Yeah.
I think they have. I think they have introduced the bull. But yeah, we'll move on and talk a little bit about their lifestyle. Get off the roller coaster of their population numbers and into their lifestyle. So the rut occurs between August and December, during which time older bulls actually will stop the younger bulls who are aged between like 4 and 6 when they've become sexually mature, but they're not quite got the size on them to compete. The older bulls will actually stop them from breeding. And those older bulls will also be the ones participating in the horn wrestling that's going on. Now the cows, if successful mating takes place, they will go through a gestation period of about 264 days, at the end of which a single calf will be born. Occasionally twins are born, but it's very, very rare. They are, as I've mentioned plenty of times, a herding animal. They are a social animal, and the herds are mostly mixed or male only. And what tends to happen is that they're pretty small herds, between 8 and 13. And for the most part, the females, the calves, and the young males will be the main part of the herd. And there'll be kind of satellite males hanging around. But they're not actually separate from the herd as such. They are part of that herd. They just only really come in and interact during rutting, mating, and if they need to protect the herd at all. That's why they're there. The herd itself is matriarchal. It's led by elder females. And those, like I say, the orbiting males, they'll be the elder males as well. They won't be, the young or the middle. They are the elder males, the ones that know what they're doing. Now the cultural and ecological significance of Europe's wisent and the herds can't really be understated. Gareth, you've already kind of spoiled part of this, but they have been historically very significant to us. They've appeared in terms of our expressive hobbies, our arts and stuff. They've appeared in everything from cave art to little rock sculptures that have been made in prehistory, or at least in ancient history. And some of the cave drawings are amazing. But basically, you can find them represented in cave paintings, rock carvings, sculptures, paintings, photography, glass, and so much more. They really do seem to have left an impression on us, which is what makes it even weirder that people can poach these guys, or in the case of the German soldiers, and I'm sure it wasn't just the German soldiers doing it, but they're the ones that documented doing it, shooting them as they moved out. So clearly they're very important to us and have maintained that powerful impression in our collective psyche that I mentioned. But even today, it stands as the national animal of
Poland.
And for extra 50 points.
Oh God.
Begins with a B. That's a clue.
Oh, Belarus.
Hey, yeah, there we go. 50 points to Gareth. 50 points to Gryffindor or wherever it is.
I don't think I'd have been Gryffindor. I think Raven. I like the one with the Ravenclaw.
Oh,
Although I also think Slytherin as well, because I like snakes. But then again, I like badgers. About the only one I'm not so bothered by is
lions.
Is a lion. Which actually brings me on to a point. When it comes to these guys being part of our sort of collective cultural psyche, why don't you see them on any coats of arms?
Well, you do.
Or heraldry.
You do.
I can't honestly think of any. I can think of more lions on coats of arms. Heraldry.
One of which actually surprises me a great deal. Yeah. So not only are they the national animal of Poland and Belarus, they also feature in the country's heraldry.
Oh, well, there you
go.
So
the coat of arms for both urban locations and actual individual families too In fact, even as far away from the protective epicenter of Poland as Spain.
Huh.
Yes, the Basque people, they honor the species in their coat of arms for the town of Kortzubi.
Honestly, wouldn't have thought of them.
Kortzubi, sorry.
I wouldn't have thought of them as a Spanish animal.
No.
I know that's weird, but I wouldn't have honestly thought of them being that far south.
When I think of Spanish animals, I think of
lynx and
Iberian lynx, Iberian bears, Iberian wolves, genets.
almost
vultures.
African animals.
Yeah, but no, they do have wisent there, so it stands to reason. But also the Basque people are ever so slightly different. But I mean, with Spain, I don't know if people know the politics and the geography of Spain, but it's very complicated, and there are regions that are very much
almost autonomous.
No, they are autonomous, but they almost in fact they do in a couple of cases, and Basque being one of them, claim their own
heritage
as a country. The ones that come to mind, Basque and Catalonia. And the Basque people, though, they are a little bit extra different. Their language is nowhere near Spanish, whereas the other languages, the other versions of Spanish that you hear, they all are related to Castilian. Whereas with Basque people, it's neither Spanish or French. The closest language to it is Welsh.
Of course,
they are
be from those sort of Welsh exploratory missions they sent all those years ago to invade.
You've got Gaelic, Welsh, and Cornish, all very similar, and Basque. And it's
a very ancient language. Then
it's to do with like the peoples that lived there historically. So yeah, very interesting. Now, with all that in mind, like I say, it kind of saddened me somewhat that the wisent has maintained such a status of importance amongst us from way back when we painted them on the walls of our caves to today, where we're desperately scrambling to try and save them, and they're on our coats of arms. And yet, unlike the First Nation people of America, there doesn't seem to be any spiritual significance for them. Because one of the things that I really am interested in delving into when it comes to bison is the Native American beliefs that are associated with them. But for Europeans, I couldn't find any record of what pre-Abrahamic European peoples felt about wisent.
I think there you go. I think that's probably it. It's been absorbed and sort of wiped from the record because of Christianity and I suppose it is in Spain, Islam coming in, and then Christianity just changing hands in Spain most of the time. But yeah, I would imagine that's what's
I feel that by the time the Abrahamic religions got to America, it was
the traditions and everything were already very much ingrained into those.
Yeah, it was at a later date.
Yeah.
Whereas in Europe, it was much earlier. You find it with even as kind of recent as ancient Greece, the Romans, they bastardized everything, and then when the Abrahamic cultures kind of took over, they absorbed and eliminated. So I agree. I think that's why. But all I could find with regards to them for pre-Abrahamic peoples is they were important to them. that I can't. If there are people that whose names I've come across in getting ready for this wisent creature feature, who I'd love to have on to interview at some point about them, and that's going to be one of the questions I pose them. Like, do we know what pre-Abrahamic culture Europeans felt about the wisent, using the bison and the First Nation Americans as an example? Of course, that relationship is not without its
very
own
different,
toxicity. Because well, between them and European settlers, the bison very nearly disappeared too. But at least there's a spiritual history there that you can look into.
Yeah, that's probably not. It's probably not present with a lot of animals in Europe. We've sort of wiped it from our traditions.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, if we cast our minds back to earlier in the creature feature, I mentioned that our modern term wisent comes to us via a couple languages, but its root was in was it
Proto-Germanic?
Visander, which is Norse.
Yeah.
The Norse are an example, and also the ancient Greeks are an example of animals that are very having spiritualities that have animals at the heart of their cultures. Odin has two ravens, Hugin and Munin, who basically bring him tidings from around the world. There's that.
Did he have a wisent as well?
There is there. I don't think he did. I'm sure that I have come across wisent in Norse mythology somewhere, but not a big mention of them.
No.
That's weird for such a big animal. Wolves, you've got Fenrir, and there's a wolf that eats the moon, I think, and a hound that eats the sun. This is all during Ragnarok. You've got the world snake.
Yeah.
You've got that deer that is on the in the tree of life, the world tree.
Oh yeah. A squirrel.
The squirrel that's talking crap between the eagle and the dragon at the bottom. And then, as I say, flying over to Greece and Macedonia, Zeus is often seen
Eagles
with an eagle
and a swan and
swan. He turns himself into a bull. The flies, the peacock.
Eyes of Hera.
Peacock. Yeah.
That's
Argos.
That's afterwards, because peacocks weren't introduced until after antiquity.
No,
so that's a later addition.
But then you've got all the sea creatures that Poseidon communes with. My point is that there are cultures in Europe that have animals in very
they just don't turn up.
But wisent don't seem to be there. So yeah, I think that they're interesting for their absence in that light. But yeah, I think I'd quite like to see if we could get an authority on wisent to come in and comment on that. That pretty much leads us to the end of the wisent creature feature, guys.
That's really cool. I mean, that's an animal that you wouldn't think there'd be a ton of, but there's an awful lot of stuff there.
There is a growing number of them. I used to see them every day.
That's because you worked with them.
Yeah, but even because I kind of worked with them briefly. I worked very, 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 very briefly, and in fact, not much at all. But enough to get close to them and think, wow. But I mainly actually saw, because there were 2 points in my career where I mainly saw them. So we had elk, which is European moose, not the American elk.
The wapiti.
The wapiti, yeah. The elk for our American listeners, what you call a moose, we have we have its European cousin, and we call it an elk.
Just to confuse things, really.
Yeah, we had two. The male passed away, unfortunately, but we moved the female elk up onto the bison reserve. The bison reserve was pretty big. You've been there. Now it's a big grassland at the top, but as you go down the hill, it becomes woodland. And it's really interesting watching the wisent stay up on the grassland, even in the wind, up on the grassland, and the elk never emerging from the trees.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So there was that, but because of that, we'd feed them, and we'd muck them out as well, and they're just huge. They're so impressive, so impressive, and they're right next to the lion reserve too. So when I was on the gates on the lions, not so much when I was in the truck, but when I was on gates at the lion enclosure, or when I was having my lunch in the little lion hut there, I would get a pretty good view of wisent for a fair amount of time.
Wonder if the lions had a good view of them as well.
Yeah, well,
we're dreaming one day.
They definitely could from their holding pen. Do you know where we worked before? We had that holding pen. They had a much
similar one, yeah,
a much more favorably sized one for a pride of lions. And yeah, they could see each other from across there, for sure. Yeah, wisent.
Cool. Right, well, let's let's move the herd on into our emails for this week, shall
Yeah, I like to call them thunder cows.
Bing! You've got mail.
Ooh, it's an email.
Right, well, we're into this week's emails, and we're going to start things off with last week's question, which was, what do you call this animal? That animal being the slater, the woodlouse, the chiggy pig, the cheese roller, the billy button, all of these different names for these animals. Now, most of the people who've replied are obviously from the UK, which I definitely think has the most common names given by people, which we worked out is more than what the puma has right the way throughout the Americas.
Which is
so
quite a feat.
That's quite an impressive feat. So the first one we'll start off with is Tara Buse, and they're in the UK. Woodlouse, we get a lot of them trying to live in our house. Fair enough. Robin Clark, Chiggy Pig, according to me and my sister in North Devon. Ellis Jackson, I call them Slater Bugs. I'm in South Australia. I agree with Ellis because that's what I always called them. And Cassie Longy has put Slateroos in Orkney up in Scotland, which they
I would have swapped though. I would have said Slater in Orkney and Slateroos in Australia.
This is true, I suppose, but well, there you go. That's what they get called there.
Yeah. So then Kelsey Watts says Chiggy Pig in it. Natalia Martin says, I call it a woodlouse. I never knew they had nicknames until I moved to Devon and wondered what the hell a Chiggy Pig was.
It did throw me initially as well.
Then Mum tells me that where she comes from, they call them Gramaso. Gramasos.
Oh. Where's she from originally?
I can't remember.
I can't. Fair enough.
Well, you put the map up. Where does it say Gramaso on the map?
I'll have to have a look at it. But well, yeah.
We've also got Woodlouse, and
Never
Yorkshire, UK. That's from Sam Stockdale.
No, come on, they're lovely. They're lovely.
I really like Chiggy Pigs. Sarah Curtis says Chiggy Pig, and Jimmy Edwards says Chucky Pig.
Ah,
so there we go.
There you go.
It's the differences that
it's just subtle, life. Yeah. In fact, I'd love to see if it almost like a gradient of them changing from one end of the country.
Chiggy, chuggy, chiggy,
cheesy,
choggy,
something, and then it becomes a Slater. Well, based on the fact that we've taken a real good look at one of Europe's largest animals this week, we are going to ask what this week's question, which is, what is your favorite European animal? Now, that can be everything from invertebrates to reptiles to mammals, birds, you name it. If it's a European animal, what's your favorite? Aaron, this is a nice, really hard question for you to try and narrow it down. What's your favorite European animal?
Yeah, I think my
we'll come back to you in about a week.
My biases are betrayed though, aren't they? It's got.
Is it going to be the Iberian lynx or the Iberian wolf?
It's probably. Well, I mean, Eurasian wolf is good too. So it's probably Iberian wolf or Eurasian wolf. And wisent would probably be a close second.
Okay.
And then of course fin whales.
Yeah.
Common dolphins. I'm going to shut up now. I'll just list all the European species, and then I'll have to put them into an order, and it just do my head in.
Well, I'm gonna go with two.
Okay.
There's two that I really quite like, and I'm really quite fond of. I think you're about to knock that over on us then. Really quite fond of the osprey, because it is such a stunning bird of prey. Yeah. Now, they're not just found in Europe, but there's something about them, the fact that they're on the increase, and people are trying to put more nesting sites in for them to try and get those numbers bolstered in the UK, that I really quite like. And badgers. I just like badgers. And in Devon, weirdly, because there seems to be this
is a good one. Yeah,
there seems to be this love-hate. There are people who really hate badgers, but then there are people who love them, and they're just such an iconic animal. And I think European badgers, compared to badgers in the rest of the world, like North American ones, the North American ones look like they're about to mug you and would probably do that as well. Whereas European badgers, they just they look a lot cuddlier, a lot friendlier. But if you tried to pick one up, you'd lose an arm. You know, they're just such a lovely looking animal, and they fit in. Unlike your wisent, they fit into culture in the UK and in Europe really well. You know, there's lots of different depictions of them.
Yeah, also actually they are kind of a charismatic representative of a family that in Europe is absolutely incredible, and we should cover more of them.
Well,
the European mustelids.
Can I just point out that we have in fact done the badger?
Yes.
We've done the pine marten. We've done the European otter.
Yes.
We've also done the beaver. We've done the hedgehog.
But the beaver is not a mustelid.
No, there's a hedgehog.
Yeah, but what I was saying was, it's
if you're picking mustelids, that's fine.
European mustelids.
Well, we've done those three. We've done the three biggest ones in the
European
UK.
mustelids are fantastic animals.
But as our European animals collection, even just the European mammals, we've done quite a few.
Yeah, we've done well with European animals. Yeah.
Well, tell us what your favorite European animal is. Like I say, it doesn't have to be a mammal. It can be a bird, a reptile, an amphibian, whatever. Tell us on our Facebook page where that will be going up, and you can join in the conversation. You can also get in contact with us via our email address, which is thenathistorykupboard@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter, definitely Twitter, not X, don't call it anything else, Instagram, and of course on our YouTube channel, which has just been floating there in the backgroround, and on TikTok as well, but no one really talks to us on TikTok. I don't know.
Oh, well,
I just put
TikTok's
videos
a weird thing. We don't.
No one knows what it actually is.
Yeah.
But there is other ways that you can get in contact with us, and that is through our Patreon. If you so want to join our Patreon, Aaron, tell us about our Patreons.
Well, firstly, we want to thank our patrons, and that is Chelsea McKee, Connie P, Jen Greenhall, Fogtober, and Nick to Nick. You guys support us financially by donating monthly to us. We are eternally grateful for that. As you can already see, we're trying to use that to improve things.
Yeah, I mean, look,
in and out of the cupboard, but for the cupboard.
Yeah.
So we're never going to be able to word our gratitude.
We'll start with thank you.
But yeah,
if you want to join our Patreon, you can do so by tracking us down that way. That pretty much brings us to the end of this week's episode. So a big thank you to you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
That's all right.
Thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, and a big thank you to you at home for listening. And we'll see you next time here in the Natural History Cupboard. Bye.
Bye. One does not simply record a creature feature on the wisent in the new cupboard without having the whiteboard fall on them several times, causing minor concussions for the whole team.